The Force has always played a major role within the Star Wars universe, granting special powers and abilities to those capable of wielding it, and even shaping the fate of the galaxy itself.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life breeds it, makes it grow.
The Force is what gives the Jedi its power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together.
Luminous beings, Toby, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you.
Although both Obi-Wan and Yoda do an excellent job of providing a brief description of what the Force is, there are a few aspects that make up the Force that we all know and love. This video will use examples from both Disney's new canon and Legends to explain these aspects and how they come together to create the Force. For starters, in Legends, the Force was made up of 5 aspects, while Disney's new canon is only made up of 3. The 5 aspects of the Force within Legends are the Living Force, Unifying Force, Cosmic Force, Physical Force, and yes, midichlorians. Now, I know midichlorians are a thing that many within the Star Wars fandom have despised and felt took away much of the mysticism that the Force once had, but I've learned to embrace them, and I'll later explain why. The Living Force is an aspect of the Force that many are most familiar with, as it is the one we see the most of. It is what is present among all living things, surrounds them, flows through them, and binds them all together. Focusing on the present, it is an aspect that relies more on the instincts and living in the moment, as even Qui-Gon Jinn pointed out in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace film.
Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs.
But Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future.
But not at the expense of the moment. Be mindful of the living Force, young Padawan.
And has been referenced in other media, such as the Clone Wars television series. The Living Force can even grant those that have truly embraced and mastered the understanding of the Living Force and themselves the ability to carry on as a Force ghost upon death, as they become one with the Force. However, this is an ability that is used more often by Jedi, but there are a few instances within Legends where a Dark Jedi or Sith has been capable of doing something similar. One of the major differences between the two being that a Force ghost is at peace and can move freely, as to where a Dark Jedi or Sith are usually bound to an object or location and are restless, often consumed by anger or even driven mad. Diving deeper, the light and the dark side are both what make up much of what the Living Force is, and are constantly fighting with one another for control. Fully embracing either side of the Force is said to grant the wielder access to powers and abilities that the other side would be incapable of using, but there are instances where this has been proven not to be true, such as the ability to use Force Heal, which Darth Traya used on the Wookiee bounty hunter Hanar, and Knights of the Old Republic 2. Plo Koon is another example of someone who used a Force power believed to be aligned with the dark side, in the case of using Force Lightning without anger or malice, calling it Electric Judgment. While many believe in such restrictions in the Force, there are some that believe that the powers and abilities granted by the Force do not have a side. It is the intent and how such powers and abilities are used that feed into either the light or the dark side of the Force, if even at all. Which brings us to the Physical Force, which is an aspect of the Force that allows those capable of wielding its powers to use many amazing powers and abilities we just touched upon, such as Force Push, Force Pull, Jedi Mind Tricks, Force Lightning, and so on. Where the Living Force focuses on the present, the Cosmic Force is what impacts the future. It's through this aspect of the Force that events are manipulated, usually to bring order to chaos within the galaxy. I mentioned this in a previous video about why do stormtroopers have bad aim, that you should totally watch if you haven't already, as it can favor a being or side in order to achieve such order. The Living Force also feeds into the Cosmic Force, and back into the Living Force in turn through midichlorians, which is how Qui-Gon Jinn stated he was able to communicate with Yoda in Season 6, Episode 11, called Voices, in the Clone Wars television series.
All energy from the Living Force, from all things that have ever lived, feeds into the Cosmic Force, binding everything and communicating to us through the midichlorians.
The future and destiny are also where the Unifying Force comes into play, as it is an aspect that is present throughout the stars and planets, throughout space and time, surrounding, penetrating, and binding it all together, much like how the Living Force does with all living things. Unlike the Living Force though, the Unifying Force is neutral, not being made up of light or dark. It's through the Unifying Force that Force-sensitive individuals are capable of receiving visions of the future. Last but not least, despite what many would have you believe, are midichlorians. Midichlorians are microscopic symbiotic organisms that are present within all living things. It was often believed that life would not be possible without them. That makes sense considering that they originate from an ancient planet known as the Wellspring of Life, that Yoda discovers in Season 6, Episode 12, called Destiny, in the Clone Wars television series. They also act as a conduit between the living force and the cosmic force, allowing the two aspects to feed into and work with one another. Although they can be measured through different tests, most commonly from the blood of a being, the resulting count was not always accurate and should never be measured as the level of power that the being tested possesses. Midichlorian counts were actually just a measurement of how in tune a being is capable of achieving with the Force. Anakin may have had the highest ever recorded midichlorian count, considering it was over 20,000, which is a number greater than even Yoda. There are quite a few beings that are considered more powerful in the Force than the Chosen One. Midichlorians could even be manipulated into creating new life, which is a technique that Darth Plagueis created and mastered, leaving fans to speculate that it was he who created Anakin Skywalker, with or without the help of Darth Sidious. This was a concept that Marvel had the chance to play around with in a recent Darth Vader comic, insinuating that it was Darth Sidious that created Anakin Skywalker this way, but was later denied as just being a dream. When Disney purchased the rights to Star Wars and made drastic changes to what is considered canon, they felt that some of the aspects were redundant, so they reduced the number from 5 to 3, having the living force absorb the physical force, and the cosmic force absorb the unifying force. This is one of the few changes to canon that didn't bother me, as the core concepts that made up those aspects were still kept, just added to the other two aspects of the Force, so nothing was truly lost. This does bring the video to a part I considered quite important, and that's how the aspects interact with one another and attempt to achieve balance. If you really look at the living and cosmic force, these two aspects work to counterbalance each other in numerous ways. As previously mentioned, the living force focuses on the present and acting on instinct, while the cosmic force focuses on the future and how destiny greatly affects our actions. The living force represents chaos, as the light and dark side are constantly fighting each other for control, always in a state of turmoil. The cosmic force represents order, neutral by nature, often manipulating events when the light or dark side has too much control, bringing them, and by extension the Force, back into balance. Meanwhile, midichlorians act as the stable glue that keeps the two together. Now, I know that was a lot of information to take in all at once, but I hope you enjoyed learning about the different aspects that make up the Force and how it is applied within the Star Wars universe. What aspect of the Force is your favorite or least favorite? Please let me know down in the comments below. I'm Anthony, and as always, may the Force be with you.